The room was thick with tension. Maya stood at the back of the meeting room, her eyes glued to the floor. She had always kept her thoughts to herself, a passive observer in a world that demanded bold voices. Today, however, something had shifted inside her. She felt the weight of every quiet moment, every unspoken word that had lingered in her life like an invisible chain. The constant fear of judgment, the stifling sense of never belonging, it had all built up until now, when she could no longer ignore the ache for change. The meeting raged on, voices rising around her. And then, as if compelled by some unknown force, Maya felt a spark of courage. She lifted her head, her eyes meeting those of her boss, Richard. Her heart pounded in her chest as her breath hitched. She wasn't sure if she was ready, but she was no longer afraid. This was the moment. Without thinking, she opened her mouth. "I disagree," she said, her voice quivering at first but growing stronger with each word. Richard's eyes locked onto hers, and the room fell silent. She had spoken. The weight of years of fear had just been lifted, and Maya knew, deep down, she would never go back to silence again. Maya's heart raced as the silence enveloped her. Her pulse pounded in her ears, and for a moment she thought she might collapse. But then, something remarkable happened. The silence wasn't as suffocating as she had imagined. Instead, it was filled with possibility. She had spoken. For the first time in years, she had found the courage to share her thoughts, to make herself heard. The weight that had burdened her chest, the constant fear of judgment and rejection, seemed to lift slightly. And yet, the room remained frozen. Richard's gaze locked onto hers, but there was no anger, no contempt. Just a quiet curiosity. He hadn't expected this, nor had she. Maya could hardly believe it herself. She had just shattered a part of her that had held her back for years. And now, with her words hanging in the air, Maya knew that things could never go back to how they were before. This was a new beginning. She could feel it. Maya's heart raced as the silence enveloped her. Her pulse pounded in her ears, and for a moment she thought she might collapse. But then, something remarkable happened. The silence wasn't as suffocating as she had imagined. Instead, it was filled with possibility. She had spoken. For the first time in years, she had found the courage to share her thoughts, to make herself heard. The weight that had burdened her chest, the constant fear of judgment and rejection, seemed to lift slightly. And yet, the room remained frozen. Richard's gaze locked onto hers, but there was no anger, no contempt. Just a quiet curiosity. He hadn't expected this, nor had she. Maya could hardly believe it herself. She had just shattered a part of her that had held her back for years. And now, with her words hanging in the air, Maya knew that things could never go back to how they were before. This was a new beginning. She could feel it. The room remained in silence for what felt like an eternity. Maya felt every inch of her body vibrating, her breath shallow as the weight of what she had just done sank in. She hadn't expected it to feel like this, so liberating, yet so terrifying. She had spoken her truth, but now the consequences of her words hung over her like a dark cloud. Richard finally broke the stillness, his voice steady but laced with curiosity. "Maya, your opinion is noted, but this is a board meeting, not a casual discussion," he said, his tone firm yet not dismissive. Maya swallowed, her mind racing as she processed his words. What had she just done? It was too late to take it back now. She stood taller, suddenly feeling more alive than ever, yet aware that she had just crossed an invisible line. Her colleagues, once indifferent to her presence, were now watching her every move. She couldn't undo the decision, but she could own it. This was her moment. She didn't know what would happen next, but she was done hiding in the shadows. This was the beginning of something new. For once, the silence was no longer a cage, it was her freedom. After the meeting, Maya retreated to her office, closing the door behind her with a soft click. The walls seemed to close in as she leaned against them, her hands trembling. She had done it, she had spoken out, but the fear that had been slowly building up over the years had only intensified. Her heart pounded in her chest, each beat reminding her of the risk she had just taken. The familiar comfort of silence now felt like a prison. She had always thought that blending in was safer, that being unnoticed would protect her from the harsh judgments of the world. But now, she realized she had been wrong. Standing up for herself, even in the smallest way, was more powerful than she had ever imagined. Her mind raced with thoughts of what would happen next. Would Richard retaliate? Would her colleagues finally see her as she saw herself? Her breath hitched again. There was no going back now. The next step was already clear. She had to keep moving forward, no matter how much her fears screamed at her to retreat. This was her path now. The path of a voice once silent but now speaking the truth. The next morning, Maya arrived early to the office, her steps slow and deliberate. She wasn't sure what to expect. The air felt different, charged with an energy that hadn't been there before. As she walked past the usual busy cubicles, she noticed people looking up, their eyes lingering a bit longer than usual. She forced herself to keep walking, to not let the discomfort show on her face. But as she passed by, she caught a glimpse of her colleague, Lucas, 30 male, short brown hair, casual office attire, watching her with an unreadable expression. Maya's stomach twisted. The last time they had spoken, their conversation had been light and routine. Today, she could feel the difference. Her silence had been broken, and it wasn't just her that felt the weight of it. She had become someone different overnight, someone they all had to reckon with. Maya didn't know how long the silence would last, or what consequences her outburst would bring. But one thing was certain, she couldn't go back. She was no longer the quiet woman who hid in the background. She had stepped into the light, and the world would have to see her now. The next morning, Maya walked into the office with her head held a little higher than usual. She could still feel the weight of her decision from yesterday, lingering around her like a thick fog. Her heart raced whenever someone glanced in her direction, but she forced herself to breathe through it. As she passed by the break room, she caught sight of Richard, 45, male, graying hair, sharp suit, talking to a group of colleagues. They were laughing, but it felt different today. The words seemed sharper, their eyes more scrutinizing. She knew it wasn't just her imagination. Something had shifted. Richard's eyes flicked toward her, and for a split second, she caught a glimpse of what could be pity. Was he disappointed in her? The thought made her stomach churn. Her voice had disrupted the office's usual harmony, but in that moment, Maya wasn't sure if it had been worth it. She hadn't expected applause, but she hadn't expected this either. Maybe it wasn't about making a dramatic statement. Maybe it was about taking ownership of her place here, no longer hiding, no longer silent. And that terrified her more than anything else. Later that day, Maya's colleague Lucas, 30, male, short brown hair, casual office attire, approached her at her desk, a hesitant expression on his face. He was one of the few people who hadn't openly reacted to her outburst, and Maya had grown to appreciate his quiet demeanor. "Hey Maya," Lucas began, his voice soft but direct. "I don't want to overstep, but are you okay?" The question hit her like a wave, and she almost wanted to laugh. Was she okay? Was she ever okay? But instead of brushing it off, she simply nodded, a small smile tugging at the corner of her lips. "I'm fine, just still adjusting," she replied, the words feeling foreign in her mouth. Lucas studied her for a moment, then gave a slight nod, as if understanding that there was more going on than what she was saying. "If you need to talk, you know where to find me," he said before turning to walk away. His words lingered with her long after he left. She wasn't sure if she could talk about it. It all felt too raw. But something inside her was shifting, and maybe, just maybe, Lucas could be the one to help her process it. That evening, Maya stood in front of her mirror, staring at her reflection. The woman in the glass seemed like a stranger. She had always been quiet, reserved, never one to speak her mind, and yet today, she had. The voice that came out of her felt foreign, yet undeniably hers. But with that voice came the realization that nothing would ever be the same. She had broken free of the silence, and in doing so, She had cracked open a part of herself she had long kept hidden. The doubt was there, creeping into the corners of her thoughts. Was she really strong enough to keep standing up for herself? Would the people she worked with respect her now? Or would they dismiss her as a troublemaker? Her reflection stared back at her, waiting for an answer she didn't have. There was no turning back. She knew this. But that didn't make it any easier. What was the cost of finding your voice? And was she willing to pay it? The next morning, Maya was surprised to find a message from Lucas on her phone. Coffee? 10 a.m.? I'll be at the usual spot. The message was short but inviting, and it sparked a flicker of warmth in her chest. She wasn't sure why he had reached out, but she knew she needed to talk. The office felt even colder today than it had the day before, and the weight of the previous conversation still hung heavy in the air. At 10 a.m., she found herself sitting across from Lucas in a small, cozy coffee shop, the smell of fresh brew surrounding them. So, you've been keeping a lot to yourself lately, Lucas said, taking a sip of his coffee. You don't have to tell me anything you don't want to. But I know something's bothering you. You've been different since the meeting. Maya stared into her cup, unsure how to begin. For the first time, she felt a strange sense of clarity. The weight she had carried for so long, the fear of speaking out, was slowly starting to fade. She had already taken the first step. Maybe it was time to take the next one. As the conversation drifted from work to personal matters, Maya felt the weight of her fears slowly being lifted. Lucas listened intently, never interrupting, and for the first time in a long while, she felt truly heard. She realized that the fear of judgment, the fear of rejection, they were all self-imposed. No one had truly rejected her. She had been rejecting herself all along. As she shared more about the struggle she had faced over the years, Lucas' face softened with understanding. Maya, you're stronger than you think, he said quietly. You don't have to do this alone. The words struck her like a chord, resonating deep inside her. For the first time, she allowed herself to believe them. She didn't have to carry the burden of silence anymore. She wasn't just finding her voice. She was embracing it, flaws and all. And that felt like freedom. Maya felt the shift before she even entered the room. Oh. She had been asked to present at the meeting today, her first real opportunity to speak up without hesitation. The anxiety she had lived with for years bubbled beneath the surface, but today was different. Today, there was something inside her that was stronger than fear. She wasn't sure if she could change everything with one speech, but she knew she had to try. The door to the conference room loomed in front of her as she stood in the hallway, taking deep breaths. She could already hear the voices inside, her colleagues discussing the latest project. The sound felt distant, as if it belonged to someone else's world, not hers. She couldn't hide anymore. It wasn't about perfection. It was about showing up, taking that first step and putting herself in the light. As the door opened, she felt the eyes of everyone in the room turn to her. This was it. Without missing a beat, Maya stepped inside, her heart pounding, but her voice clear. Good morning, everyone. I have some ideas to share about the project. As Maya entered the room, all eyes were on her. She could feel the weight of every gaze, the pressure mounting with each step she took toward the front of the room. It was overwhelming. Her palms were sweating, and her throat felt tight. But despite all the nerves, there was a strange sense of clarity as well. She knew what she had to say, and the words felt solid in her mind. She reached the podium and glanced briefly at Richard, 45, male, graying hair, sharp suit, before turning her attention to the project slides on the screen. As she began speaking, her voice wavered at first, but then it steadied. I think we need to rethink our approach to this problem. Here's what I suggest. The words flowed easier than she expected. She was in control, and the room, while still watching intently, felt less like a judgmental space and more like a place for collaboration. Maya could feel herself gaining momentum with each word. Maya continued, her confidence slowly building as she noticed the change in the room's energy. The colleagues who once barely acknowledged her now leaned forward, eyes focused. As she spoke, her words became more forceful, clearer. The ideas she had kept locked away for so long were now flowing freely, and she could feel herself growing with each sentence. This approach isn't just about changing our strategy. It's about changing the way we think about our work. It's time for a shift in how we operate. The room was still, absorbing every word, but Maya didn't falter. She had earned their attention. She had earned her place. As she wrapped up her thoughts, she could see their expressions had softened. The skepticism had faded, replaced with the unmistakable recognition of her value. For the first time, Maya truly felt seen, and it was a feeling unlike any other. After the presentation, there was a brief pause before Richard stood up. "Well, Maya," he said, his voice measured, "that was unexpected. But I have to admit you've given us something to think about." Maya felt a rush of relief wash over her, but she quickly tamped it down. She hadn't expected a glowing review, but this acknowledgement felt like a quiet victory. As Richard addressed the group, discussing the next steps in the project, Maya couldn't help but feel a sense of pride. She had done it. She had stepped into her voice, and now she was being taken seriously. The internal struggle that had plagued her for so long had started to dissolve, replaced with the realization that this was just the beginning. The fear still lingered, but it wasn't as suffocating anymore. With every step she took towards speaking out, she was gaining more ground. Today wasn't the end. It was the first of many moments where she would not shrink back into silence. That evening, Maya sat alone at her desk, the office quiet around her. The glow of her computer screen was the only light, and for the first time, she allowed herself to relax. The adrenaline from the presentation had worn off, but the exhilaration remained. She had faced her fear, and not only had she survived, but she had thrived. Her phone buzzed and she looked down to see a message from Lucas, 30, male, short brown hair, casual office attire. "I heard how the presentation went. Proud of you. Let's grab dinner tonight." Maya smiled, a warm sensation filling her chest. She hadn't realized just how much she had needed to hear those words. It was a reminder that she wasn't alone. This was a new chapter for her, one where she embraced her voice and took ownership of her place in the world. The fear was still there, lurking, but it no longer held the power to control her. Maya's journey had only just begun, and now she could walk forward with confidence. The weight of the previous days was starting to take its toll on Maya. The presentation had been a success, but now came the hard part. The approval she had so desperately wanted felt distant, like something just out of reach. Her boss, Richard, 45, male, graying hair, sharp suit, had been distant, his comments measured and non-committal. When he called her into his office later that week, she knew it wasn't to celebrate her success. "Maya, that was an interesting approach," he began, his voice a little too calm. "But I have some concerns. We've always followed a certain method here, and your suggestions, they're unorthodox." Maya's stomach tightened as she listened, every word cutting deeper than expected. Richard wasn't outright rejecting her ideas, but it was clear he didn't see them as a viable direction for the team. She wanted to argue, to push back, but something inside her hesitated. She had fought to be heard, but now it seemed that being heard wasn't enough. She would have to fight harder to change minds, to prove herself worthy of the space she had fought to carve. Later that afternoon, Maya found herself walking through the office, her mind still spinning from Richard's words. As she passed by the break room, she overheard her colleagues discussing the project. One voice rose above the others. It was Claire, 32, female, blonde hair, professional attire, her usual friendly tone now laced with a hint of disdain. "I don't know why Richard even let her present those ideas," Claire said, loud enough for Maya to hear. "They're too risky. It's just not how we do things here." Maya's heart sank. She had expected some resistance, but hearing it from Claire stung more than she could have imagined. She had worked alongside Claire for months, had shared coffee breaks and small talk. But now, Maya wasn't sure where she stood. Her ideas were clearly radical to the team, but had she truly been foolish to believe they could work? The whispers, the doubts, they were all too real now. And the most painful part, it wasn't just Richard she had to convince. It was everyone around her. That night, Maya found herself sitting at her kitchen table, a cup of tea in front of her. She hadn't wanted to go home. The silence of her apartment felt too suffocating. But now, in the dim light of the kitchen, she couldn't stop replaying the day's events. Conversation with Richard had shaken her, but it was the words she'd overheard from Claire that cut the deepest. What if they were right? What if she was too radical, too out of place? She had worked so hard to be seen, to finally speak up, but now she was questioning whether it had been worth it. The quiet of the evening pressed in on her as she looked at her reflection in the kitchen window, wondering if she had made a mistake. Was she pushing too hard for something that was never going to happen? Was she fighting a losing battle? The doubt gnawed at her, and for the first time in a long time, Maya thought about giving up. But then she remembered why she had started this journey, not just for herself, but for the people like her, the ones who stayed silent for fear of being overlooked. She couldn't give up now. Not when she had come this far. The next day, Maya decided to confront the situation head-on. She couldn't let the doubts from Claire or Richard keep her silent. She needed answers, needed to know if she had a future at this company, or if she was just a fleeting moment in their world. So, she requested a one-on-one with Richard, and when the meeting started, she didn't waste any time. "Richard, I need to know where I stand," she said, her voice steady but firm. "I know my ideas are different, but I believe in them, and I believe they can work for the team. If you think I'm wrong, I need to hear it from you directly." Richard's face remained unreadable, but Maya could see the wheels turning in his mind. Finally, he sighed. "Maya, your ideas have potential, but you need to understand that change doesn't happen overnight. You're pushing for something big and we're not quite there yet." The words stung, but they were the clarity she had been searching for. Change wouldn't come easy, and it wouldn't come quickly, but it could come. And that was enough for now. Later that afternoon, Maya sat at her desk, reflecting on the conversation. Richard had given her a glimpse of hope, but it didn't feel like a win. She was still fighting an uphill battle, and she knew the road ahead would be filled with more resistance. But in that moment, Maya realized that it was okay. Change took time, and she was willing to fight for it. She couldn't force the world to accept her ideas overnight, but she could continue pushing, continue making her voice heard, one step at a time. As the day began to wind down, she received an email from Lucas, 30 male, short brown hair, casual office attire. "How about grabbing dinner later? You've earned it." Maya smiled, the weight of the day lifting slightly. She wasn't alone in this fight. And maybe, just maybe, she was on the right path after all. Maya's heart was still pounding as she stood in front of the mirror, staring at her reflection. The meeting had gone better than she could have expected. For the first time, Richard, 45, male, graying hair, sharp suit, had seemed genuinely open to her ideas. The weight of the past few weeks, the doubt, and the resistance began to lift. And for the first time in a long while, Maya felt something resembling hope. It wasn't just about the project anymore. It was about her journey, the fact that she had managed to stand her ground and speak her truth. She had been quiet for so long, a shadow in her own life. But today she had made her presence felt. Now, as she stared at herself, she realized that this was just the beginning. This wasn't a win just for her ideas, but for her identity. She had the power to shape her own story, and the world around her, it would have to adjust. The next morning, Maya received an unexpected email from Richard. It was short, but the words carried weight. "Your ideas have potential. We'll give it a try on the next project." A rush of relief flooded her chest as she read it for the third time. She had done it. For so long, she had feared rejection, feared that her voice would never be enough to make a difference. But now, she had been given a chance. She wasn't sure what the future held, but this was a critical step. As she sat at her desk, the usual sounds of the office hummed around her, but today, they felt different. The atmosphere seemed lighter, as if the walls themselves recognized the change that had occurred. The colleagues who had once looked at her with skepticism were now starting to see her differently. She wasn't just Maya, the quiet one. She was Maya, the one with ideas. And that was enough. Later that week, the team met to discuss the project moving forward. Maya was no longer the quiet observer in the room. Richard, 45, male, graying hair, sharp suit, had made it clear that her ideas would be integrated into the next phase. Maya's heart raced as the discussion began, her mind running through her suggestions, wondering if they would truly be accepted or if this was just lip service. As the meeting continued, she saw something remarkable. Her colleagues, once skeptical, were now nodding along, asking questions, offering suggestions that built on her concepts. Maya couldn't help but smile, the realization slowly dawning on her. This wasn't just her win, it was the team's win. They were working together, collaborating in a way that she had only dreamed of. The road ahead was still uncertain, but the fear that had once paralyzed her was now a thing of the past. Maya was here to stay, and her voice would continue to be heard. As the days passed, Maya found herself gaining more confidence, not just in her ideas, but in her ability to lead. The support from Richard and the team helped, but it was her own growing sense of self-worth that made the biggest difference. She had finally started to see herself as an equal in the room, someone whose voice was worth listening to. But just as she was starting to feel secure, an unexpected challenge emerged. A new project came up, one with a high level of risk. It was exactly the kind of challenge she had been waiting for, but it also put her in a vulnerable position. Richard called her into his office again, this time with a different tone. "Maya, I need you to lead this project," he said. "But there's no margin for error." Maya's heart skipped a beat. It was a huge responsibility, and the stakes were higher than ever. The fear from before threatened to rise again, but this time, Maya knew she had the tools to face it. This was her moment, and she would take it. The next day, Maya stood in front of the team, the weight of the project on her shoulders. But this time, there was no fear. As she outlined the plan, her voice was steady, her ideas clear. She was no longer hesitant or uncertain. She was the leader now, guiding her team toward success. The challenge was significant, but Maya was ready. She knew that the path to success wouldn't be smooth, but she also knew that her voice, her ideas, and her confidence were all tools she could rely on. As the meeting wrapped up, she could feel the team's respect for her grow. The roadblocks, the doubts, the fears, they were all part of her story. And now, Maya was the one who was writing the next chapter. The future was uncertain, but for the first time, it felt like hers to shape. Maya entered the conference room, the weight of leading the project pressing on her. Richard, 45 male, had tasked her with overseeing the team's biggest project yet. As she addressed her team, her voice was steady. "This project will define us," she said. The pressure was high, but Maya was ready. This was her moment. Days later, Claire, 32 female, told Maya she was pushing too hard. "The team isn't ready for this change," Claire warned. Maya felt the doubt but replied, "I believe in this. We can do this." Claire softened, but Maya knew she had to trust herself. Richard, 45 male, advised Maya, "You need to trust your team." Maya realized her role wasn't just to lead, but to empower the team. She needed their buy-in for success. This was her moment to shift from controlling to collaborating. Maya addressed her team with newfound confidence. "We've made it this far, and I know we'll finish strong," she said. The team was finally coming together, and Maya saw them as equals, working in unison toward a common goal. The project was a success. As the meeting wrapped up, Lucas, 30 male, congratulated Maya. "You did it." Maya smiled. "We did it." She had led her team through the challenge, and for the first time she felt like she truly belonged. Maya stood at the front of the room, her hands resting on the podium, a sense of calm settling over her. The team had just completed the final review of the project, and the outcome was a success. It was more than just the work. It was the culmination of everything she had fought for: her voice, her ideas, and her place in the team. She could see the pride in her colleagues' eyes, the respect they now had for her, and it filled her with a quiet sense of accomplishment. For the first time, she wasn't just an outsider trying to fit in. She was an integral part of something meaningful. The project was done, but the real transformation was within her. She had proven to herself and to the world that she could lead, that she could speak up, and that she could make a difference. It wasn't about the recognition anymore. It was about the journey. She had stepped into the light, and now nothing could make her go back into the shadows. Later that afternoon, Maya sat at her desk, reflecting on everything that had brought her here. The doubts, the fears, the moments when she wanted to give up, they all seemed so distant now. She had fought to find her voice, and now it felt as if the world had shifted around her. Her phone buzzed with a message from Lucas. 30 male, short brown hair, casual office attire. Dinner tonight? I think we both deserve a celebration. Maya smiled at the message. Lucas had been her quiet support throughout the whole journey, always reminding her of her strength when she had forgotten it. The realization hit her then. She wasn't alone anymore. She had found allies, not just in her colleagues, but in herself. Her journey was far from over, but for the first time, she felt ready for whatever came next. Maya walked into the coffee shop later that evening, feeling lighter than she had in a long time. Lucas was already sitting at a corner table, a wide smile on his face as he waved her over. I was beginning to think you'd forgotten about me, he joked, but there was warmth in his tone. Maya sat down across from him, feeling the familiar ease of their friendship settle in. I had a lot on my mind, she replied, her eyes sparkling with a mixture of relief and pride. They talked about everything and nothing, the project, the future, and the simple joy of being able to laugh again. Maya realized how much she had grown in these past months. She wasn't the same person who had walked into the office, unsure of herself. She was stronger, more confident, and more aware of her own worth. The following week, Maya received another message, this time from Richard. 45 male, graying hair, sharp suit. It was an invitation to lunch. I wanted to discuss the next steps. The message read. Maya felt a flutter of nerves. Was this about the project or was it something more? When they met, Richard seemed more approachable than ever. Maya, I wanted to take a moment to thank you for your work, he said. You've shown a lot of leadership, and it hasn't gone unnoticed. Maya felt her breath catch in her throat. She had worked so hard to earn this recognition, but hearing it from Richard made it real. It wasn't just the project that had succeeded, it was the confidence and trust she had built within herself and with her team. She had done it. As the day ended, Maya stood outside the office building, taking a moment to breathe in the cool evening air. The city seemed different now, quieter, more familiar. She had spent so long feeling like an outsider, but now she knew she belonged. The path ahead was still uncertain, but that no longer frightened her. She had found her voice, and with it, a sense of purpose. Maya smiled to herself, feeling the weight of the journey she had taken. The road had been hard, but it had led her to this moment of clarity and peace. She had stepped out of the shadows, and the world now had a place for her. And for the first time, she felt truly ready for whatever came next.